Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Cheney and I are back, and today we'll be providing a little bit of feedback on some of the direction that we received from council at our last meeting, and then opening up for the public hearing. So I'll go ahead and pass it on to Cheney, and she can walk through those issues that we went through.
Hi, good evening, Council. Jane Scotson, Senior Planner. And yeah, tonight we are introducing Ordinance 849. This is a lot of work went into this. This reflects a lot of planning efforts that have been undertaken over the last couple of years, but even dating back to 2021. So the draft zoning code that was in your packet is kind of a combination of implementing many things. Most recently, our adopted comprehensive plan sets policy direction, goals and policies, and implementing metrics that relate to these zoning development regulations and zoning, as well as the Ambon Boulevard Park Community Plan, the Urban Center Plan, and the Housing Action Plan that was adopted in 2021. All of these are kind of foundational documents and informing the decisions and regulations as they're drafted. As well as a new zoning map. The map on the screen here is it reflects the areas of the city which are changing zones or are proposed to be changed, zones to be changed as part of this ordinance. And I'm still kind of learning the history, but through the Ambon Boulevard Park Community Plan and the Urban Center Plan, major focus was on these urban or these transit-oriented routes and these kind of urban hubs for updating the development standards and regulations, as well as design standards for future development of kind of higher density, multifamily, mixed use, and commercial uses, really focusing on these areas. The areas not lit up on this map do not have any proposed zoning changes in this ordinance. So that would be our single family zones and our industrial zones, but we'll come back next year with some additional ordinances to address those areas of the city. There are a couple of things that we'd like to highlight from the conversation our consultants led last meeting or 2 meetings ago on October 21st to tonight is there was a discussion on the limited height overlay. The limited height overlay is this boundary you can see on the map, and we showed this map. Oh yeah, you can see on the slide, this map here. The intention of the limited height overlay is basically a way to discourage redevelopment. It's a way to preserve the character that exists. So when you walk down 152nd, you have a lot of local businesses and a lot of, I mean, it's fairly dense, while it's still single story. And basically, the idea was, there's also similar but not the same character along 153rd and east of 4th Avenue. Based on the conversation we had a couple meetings ago, we revised the limited height overlay because we kind of agreed, the area covered in red now is close to a lot of amenities and has a different development pattern, has a different urban design feel than 152nd does. There is parking between the sidewalk and the businesses, and redevelopment of some of these larger lots actually may provide more community benefits than preserving them would through having higher density and achieving a kind of a bigger return on investment. And so what we've proposed here and included in the ordinance is this map. It is a reduction in the limited height overlay size to really focus what we want in terms of preserving the character of a portion of 152nd and Old Burien. It doesn't mean that all of the area in red is going to redevelopment at the same time. And I think that was kind of a concern too, that there's going to be this pitter-patter redevelopment. But in terms of weighing the costs and benefits and where the conversation was and proximity to transit and the other benefits that we can kind of extract from 153rd redevelopment over time, we're happy with the map highlighted in green. And like I said, that's in the ordinance, but you probably saw in your packet and in the memo that the other map is attached. So if there's further discussion to be had, we can about which one ends up in your recommendation. but staff believe and kind of agree with council on reducing the footprint of that limited height overlay. The second item that was of discussion last meeting was in relation to parking and the desire for parking not to be a major barrier for development in Burien. And I think that the development community probably loves to hear this. It's great. So Burien has already, and we didn't cover this in last meeting, but has a lot of tools in our tool belt already to be responsive to market conditions as it relates to parking, particularly in our what was previously the Special Planning Area 1, Old Burien, and our downtown zones. So the city has a number of existing provisions like a fee in lieu option, or when a new use wants to occupy an existing building, if the building was existing since 2017, then if the use has a different parking ratio, you wouldn't be required to provide additional parking on site. Basically trying to address some of these infill problems that can occur when different uses move into vacant or redeveloped sites. Or I guess existing buildings, vacant buildings, not vacant sites. As well as not applying parking standards for development under a certain threshold. Anyway, enough about our existing code in terms of ways that we are responsive to developers not wanting to provide a lot of parking in these areas. In the new code and in the ordinance proposed tonight, we've amended a little bit this table of the required parking citywide. So this is for all apartments. The change is reducing the parking requirement for a studio apartment. So when you calculate the parking requirements for a development, sometimes, depending on the city, you may have a parking standard per bedroom size. How many units you have of that size, you multiply and you add it up. This is kind of similar, but operating in a different way, whereas it's 0.5 parking spaces for a studio. So we're seeing a reduction in the required parking for those studio. Originally, in what was presented a couple weeks ago, this was just for the artist studios or artist studio lofts. And we've amended it here so it would still apply to artist studios, but it would also apply to just regular studio apartments. So if future developments have that, they could benefit from a lower required parking standard.
I might also just briefly add that we did carry over provision to modify the minimum required parking stalls through a parking study, and that's at director's discretion. So that's one other flexibility area that we have in the code.
Thank you. In addition to this, what's shown on the screen, which is a minor change, making studio apartments, reducing the required parking for studio apartments. There's also a new exemption for parking requirements near transit. So if you're within a quarter mile from like how the crow flies, so a quarter mile radius around frequent transit stops, no parking would be required for the dwelling units that are specifically for seniors, people with disabilities, or the guest parking. So in our code, we require parking for the units, and then of projects of a certain size, you need to have guest parking for visitors. And so when you're within really close proximity to transit, we're have an additional exemption or reduction in the total required parking spaces, as well as you can also achieve a reduction in the parking requirement through a parking study. And this is something that was discussed a lot with Planning Commission was bicycle parking. We shouldn't just be talking about parking as it relates to cars, but we want Burien to be a multimodal community, and there are new provisions related to short-term parking, long-term parking, what is a good size in terms of how much should be provided. And also in those regulations, we've included the flexibility when, say the standard results in maybe an expensive investment, and there's ability for the developer to request a deviation from what the standard results in. So at the director's discretion, if it's an area not well served by transit, or there isn't a belief that this housing type is going to need a lot of long store parking storage as would be regulated, there's a way for to show some flexibility in those regulations. So those are really the highlights or the follow-ups we wanted to cover in terms of the draft zoning or Title 19 Ordinance 849 Code Amendments. But the process we need to follow for amending the code is pursuant to BMC, Burien Municipal Code 1965-100, which is sets the criteria and the process for reviewing these. It's through a type 4. Usually you just need to hold one public hearing, but since there has been some progression in terms of the draft code amendments from the Planning Commission hosted public hearing in June, we thought we might as well host another one here for the transparency and to bring everyone along the way. So tonight we're hosting a public hearing right now for these code amendments, and then we're hoping that by this introduction of the ordinance, we get a motion and have final action made on November 18th. Thanks. This is the criteria that is required to satisfy, you're required to satisfy this criteria to amend the code and the zoning map. And that is, are your code amendments consistent with the comprehensive plan? And you'll notice in the staff report, I pulled quite a few existing goals and policies from our recently adopted comprehensive plan. And also demonstrates how the code amendments bear a substantial relation to public health, safety, and welfare. I think we can think back to that new air and pollution overlay the city has adopted or is considering adoption for mitigating air and noise impacts within that overlay, as well as promoting transit-oriented development. And like a lot of these code amendments are really responsive to not only, satisfying maybe a middle ground between the developer and the community, but also we're able to extract a lot of community benefits, which I think also are in the interest of the community as a whole with these new pedestrian-oriented streets and the provisions to require community amenities like benches and outdoor open space or ground floor retail and in important or essential kind of strips that are different throughout the city to kind of create those nodes in important areas. Another item worth mentioning is that as part of these code amendments, I focused a lot about our transit-oriented retail areas, but we also are upzoning a lot of the city. There's about 2,000 lots that are going from an existing single-family zone to a multi-family zone. And what happens is you might have a neighborhood of single-family homes that now has an increased zoning. So we want to make sure that our development regulations are also kind of acknowledging that scenario. So where a new development may be able to come in and build a new grocery store or build a new restaurant, with the existing fabric of a single-family neighborhood, there are provisions that those detached single-family homes could also occupy or use 50% of their floor area to be an eating and drinking establishment, so a restaurant or a retail or office space. So also kind of pushing those opportunities for more, I don't know, vibrant or interesting assets to neighborhoods throughout the city, not just along transit lines. This is the Community Development Director's recommendation that the City of Burien approve, or the City Council approve the proposed Title 19 code amendments as written. And I think I kind of crafted this PowerPoint as the presentation, but now this is the public hearing. So I think the recommendation is to open the public hearing, and then we'll take your questions at the next portion.
Thank you very much.